Hello, friends, and welcome to Montessori 101, a live show from Child of the Redwoods, all about the magic of Montessori. We believe that every child deserves a Montessori education. I'm Aubrey Hargis.
And I'm David Hargis. So whether you're joining us live, hello out there, or you're watching the replay, maybe you're listening to the podcast, however you're getting to us, we're just really happy to have you with us. And if you want to know more about our work, you can head over to our website, childoftheredwoods.com.
Yes, I see Marika is here. Hello. Thank you for joining us. Well, today we have another installment in our awesome lessons series from Montessori 101. This one is from the math area.
That's right. I think we haven't done a math in a while.
Did you drop your stuff?
I did drop my stuff. Oh, well.
Yeah. So David was actually showing you our mathematics planning and documentation guide for our primary course and the mathematics lessons and activities guide from our primary course, which is perfect because this lesson is actually featured inside those. I'm sure David will find that area for you. For those of you who are in primary right now, if you are, give me a little shout out and say hi in our chat. I love that.
Lower L, actually, it's also
in lower L. Yeah. So if your child doesn't get to it in primary, it's never too late to do this activity as well.
That's right. But even if you're not in one of our programs, if you have a little one who's interested in numbers and you're ready to introduce number sense and things like that, this is an awesome lesson for doing that.
Yes.
You ready to jump into
Let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is the lesson that we're going to talk about?
Okay, here is what we're actually doing. We are teaching number sense to children. Number sense, I know it sounds kind of like foggy, like how can you have sense about numbers? What does that mean, really? Number sense is all of the kind of the stuff that you do before you're really teaching children how to add, subtract, and multiply and divide. So before the operations, we want to understand the concept of quantity, which is how many of something there is. And I'll just show you. I have these little pieces of clay that I've formed into these little counters. We actually use these in our lower elementary classroom, but I'm just going to use them as counters today. And so I have in my hand, I bet you already can tell, 3, right? And so you don't even need to count them as an adult to know that there are 3 counters in my hands. You probably have worked with enough numbers over your adult life so that you can just look at something and say, oh, that's 3, or, oh, that's about 5, or, oh, that's about 10, or, hey, that's a whole lot, probably like hundreds
estimation, or just being able to visualize it.
Yeah.
You don't probably remember learning that, but you did.
And you might not even be really conscious of how you learned it, but you probably are using number sense in your daily life all the time. You look at a bookshelf and you kind of, in your mind, you kind of just like know about how many books are on it. Or
you go grocery shopping and you're trying to stay in your budget and you're maybe trying to figure out how much things cost and you're estimating a total as you go along. You're not trying to calculate to the penny, but you're using estimation and a number sense in order to aid in that kind of work.
Yeah. So that is really what we're trying to do with children in this lesson. We're associating a quantity, which is the actual number of how many something is, to an actual numeral, which is what we usually refer to as numbers. But in Montessori, we're going to get very specific. These are actually called numerals because when you talk about a numeral, anyone can look at this and memorize the shape of it being 4. But that is a totally different thing from seeing, 4 counters, or 4 objects and knowing, that these 2 things go together, right? This is actually 3. So it would be like the 3 goes with this. So that's really what we're talking about.
Now this reminds me go ahead.
When we talk about numbers, we're talking about the quantity plus the symbol, which is the numeral. And that's really just the concept of a number, right? So we're getting really specific. We're kind of separating those things out. We're talking about counting and numerals. And we do both of those things in this lesson. And so in this lesson, your child is going to be associating the quantity with the numeral. They're going to be sequencing the numerals themselves and maybe the quantities as well. And they're going to be learning two really important ways to qualify numbers,
Mhm.
really like put a kind of label on them and understand them in a different way. And that is the concept of odd versus even.
That's
Okay.
right.
So in Montessori, there are, this is kind of the classic way that we teach odd and even.
Hmm. So yeah, so it occurred to me as you were describing, I hadn't thought of this before. There's a lot of similarity to the way that we teach reading and letters and letter sounds in the past, in the last few awesome lessons, like that idea of associating a sound with the visualization of that sound, which we would call a letter, sort of reminds me of how we would take something physical, or in this case, like a quantity, and associate it with a symbol, the number three, the numeral three. And it just hadn't really ever occurred to me how similar the math and the language concepts are for this age group.
Yes. So,
and that makes sense because at this age, you're introducing this. This would be at the very youngest age for where we would start at like 2.5, 3, right? This is where you might. This is a level 1 activity after they have some basic sense of.
Well, we say that children are generally demonstrating a real readiness and interest for numbers at I know this is going to surprise you, but at about 4 years old or 4.5. Sometimes not even until 5 will children kind of, maybe they can understand, just like they will have been exposed to numbers earlier often. But sometimes you don't see that just like budding interest in exploring numbers until about age 4.
So, right. And that actually goes to a different point about when we talk about levels in our system. The reason we developed the system of levels, level 1, 2, 3 within the primary and the level 1, 2, 3 within lower elementary, is because we know that every child is unique, that human development is varied and wide, that there are averages and standards and common ways, but that doesn't mean that any two children or any two humans are going to go the same way. And so when we talk about level 1, 2, and 3, it shouldn't be taken to mean age 3, 4, and 5, or grade 1, 2,
2 and 3,
right? It's really first knowledge, building knowledge, subsequent knowledge, right? It's a sense of scaffolding of knowledge, right? From the earliest concepts to later and later concepts, and then it never ends.
Yeah.
It's a ladder on in perpetuity.
I mean, we could say from easy to advanced, but I think that even some of the easy things can be complicated for little ones.
I mean, let's be real. That the concept that we're going to call this a 2 and give it a numeral 2 is not so easy. I mean, it took us thousands and thousands of years for humans to invent the number system. It was, fairly recent when you think about like the cornerstone inventions of humankind. It's a fairly recent one, and it's actually covered in one of our great stories, right? Which is, I think, why you made these little tokens.
Yes. All right. Well, let's talk about what we actually need to teach this lesson.
Yeah, right. So what do you need?
Well, we need counters, right?
So what is a counter? I'm a counter. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, we need objects to count with.
Oh.
And specifically, we need 55 of them.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. So here and these are actually really easy to make with air dry clay, by the way, friends. So if you are inspired to do a little DIY, these are actually really fun. Get some air dry clay, mash them into little circles. You can just I think what I did was I just rolled it into a tiny little ball, and then I just used my thumb and I just mashed it. And it just made these beautiful little counters. So they're fun. So you need 55 objects.
Now, traditionally,
David, you have to let me finish the sentence. Okay. You need 55 objects. Otherwise, I'm going to forget what I was going to say. Okay. So stop doing it. All right. So you need 55 objects. And thank you. And these objects can be DIY'd out of clay, but a more common one would be like the little glass beads that you find that you put in vases. Okay. So that's one really easy way to find a counter. Another could be little teeny tiny erasers. that you use. You could
Yeah.
put those in a little row, find 55 of those. Sometimes you can find those at hobby stores in the birthday section or in the party
Yep.
section or a party store, that sort of thing. Pennies or coins,
Mhm.
whatever the base
Because you want them all
coin
to be the
is.
same.
Correct. So anything you have a large quantity of, 55
55.
of, it could just be beads. You could go to a craft store and go find some beads. Now, what were you going to say?
Now, aren't they traditionally red disc?
Not well, if you are going to buy the work from
Mhm.
a Montessori company,
Yeah.
then it generally looks like a set of red cutout numbers
Right.
or numerals, as we say, and the little counters would be little red discs. It would be little red circles,
So
but about this size.
So the point is that if you're out there thinking like, oh, it has to be little red disc, that's not true, right? It just has to be 55, and that's the quantity you would need in order to match to the cards
Yes.
or the numerals of the something identical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Stones, pebbles work really well as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
So
any
DIY. This is a DIY
little
friendly
objects. You just
very
need some little
DIY
objects,
friendly.
and the more fun the objects, maybe the better. I remember in the classroom doing this work, we had these little rabbits that we would count with. They were little. I don't even know if you
Were
can
they
find
like
those anymore.
erasers or
I know
something?
sometimes they sell little counting bears.
Oh,
so
yeah.
that's a very common one, and mine just happened to be little counting math rabbits.
Didn't you have bees ones, like little honeybees?
I got those at a craft store. Yeah.
Those were really
or
fun.
buttons. Those would be really
yeah.
good counters. And it might be hard to find buttons that are exactly the same, but if they're more or less the same, they still would work. Just little round shapes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for a first lesson, it's great if your objects look exactly alike. If your child really knows quantity really well and can handle that, then it's totally fine to use their toys or something too. I'm imagining maybe you've got little Lego. I don't know if you have 55 little Lego people, but if you did,
that'd be a lot of Lego.
Wouldn't that be so cute and fun? You definitely have 55 Legos, right? So you
That's
could use
true.
Lego pieces, right? So this is a really versatile work. Kids of very little ones enjoy it, and they continue to enjoy it, or they can continue to enjoy it for quite some time.
So you have to have 55 of some of the same kind of thing or something very, very similar. And then what else do you need?
Well, you need numerals. And so we have in our set that we made that will be available in our shop later on, probably pretty soon, because we're going to be done. We've already written the lesson. We're in the editing process of the layout for it. So you need some kind of numerals set. And in our set, we decided to make a set of 1 to 10. And then we also decided to take it on all the way up to 20. If you have a child, I love you so much. If you have a child who knows their teens and wants to practice teens, then this can be just like a perfect extension of that as well. Go ahead.
Because it traditionally just goes to 10, right?
Traditionally, the cards and counters work. If you were to just purchase it, it is an introductory material for 1 to 10.
But you could go as far as your imagination. And a lot of times kids really get interested. I saw Marika, you were saying that your little guy was getting interested in numbers and the math curriculum.
Fascinated with numbers.
When kids get really excited about it, they might not want to stop at 10 or even 20. And as long as you have enough materials, and that's the thing about maybe DIY, a DIY set is the sky's the limit. Especially I think when I think about older kids, they sometimes really want to see gigantic layouts.
Yes. So if your child's in lower elementary, say they are pretty good with teen numbers, or even if in the later primary years, if they're really working, like maybe they want to do this work all the way to 100, it is not totally uncommon. You could repurpose your 100 board and turn it into a really cool little teeny tiny odd and even work,
Totally.
and so there are lots of possibilities with this. It works for multiple age groups. The other things that you need for this work, obviously you need something to put your counters in. And if you want to do the sorting extension, which we're providing, you need labels that say odd and even. And here we've just done, this is a little bit for control of error. We'll talk about this again later. Just Oh, you could do it on index cards, just some labels that say odd and even.
Environmental print as well.
Yes. And you need your counters. And really, that's all you need to do the basic work. But as extensions, some things that our members find that are fun, if your child is really working on this concept, they might want to do it in several different ways, play different games with it. So we have created some extensions. One extension would be giving them the cards, the counter work in card form. So here we have a bunch. You can see instead of just the little counters, they are on the cards already, ready to be associated with a numeral. And you can take your counter and you could just lay these out and have them put their counters on top, and especially a child who is less secure with their numbers, might enjoy this, or it's actually just a very satisfying work.
Yeah.
As our oldest would say, something can be very satisfying, even if you understand the concept, just, taking those counters and putting them on top, just to really get in the concept of placement and order and sequence. And
this is the premise of the adult coloring book, I think, right?
Sort of. I mean,
in the sense of it's sometimes it's very sad. Like I said, it's satisfying to do.
Calming and satisfying.
Yeah, right.
And it also hones in the concept of odd and even a little further.
Fine motor skills and things.
And then, if you want to go with a set like ours, we created for the sake of cuteness, but also to teach the concept that odd really just has one person, an independent person working. If you want to put a positive spin on it, usually we think of one as being the loneliest number, but it could just be an independent person who, is very doing their own thing, and that's awesome. But also even would be working with someone in a collaborative fashion.
That's right.
Yes. And that's also fun. Both are fun. Yeah. So in order to demonstrate that concept, we created these little cards, and they actually have little people on them. So you can see these people have partners, no partner, independent worker.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's really clear to see. And then you would be associating the number, the numeral, with the card that shows, the placement of the partners or independent people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to, I love DIY. And if you wanted to DIY a set like this, I imagine you could take some index cards and then put little stickers, like star stickers on it. That would be a way to DIY.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you're wanting to show the numeral. You want to have the counters.
Yep.
Which are the physical things.
Yep.
You're going to want and the labels, and that's the base. And then you could add to that something like in our set where we have the dots, the one with the dots, and then the one with a different kind of visualization of the number.
Yes, the counters that are on paper, right? Maybe your child is associating. Okay, just different variations.
And this is all to help them understand that when we say one, we mean a certain specific quantity of things, and that thing could be a quantity I hold in my hand. It could be a quantity that's shaped like this on a piece of paper.
Well, we're also, if you think about it, we're also kind of priming them to count by twos. As if you take a look at some of these later on teens,
they're 16.
They're 16, yeah. Excuse me. So yeah, you can see we're really priming them to count 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and they may start to do that
skip
anyway,
counting,
to do skip counting. And it's just a great way to reinforce all of these concepts. Yeah. So,
all right. So,
the other thing I would like to say before we go into the actual lesson itself, we've got about 10 more minutes or so, is that before your child does this lesson, there are two things that they need to have practiced.
Okay. So these would be predecessor skills.
Right. So prerequisites to doing the odd and even counter work would be to be familiar with the concept of quantity.
Mhm.
So, your child should be able to understand that this is 3 already. Before they do this work, you have already said, bring me 3, and they have been able to bring you 3
Mhm.
objects of something, and to understand that this is the quantity of 3. And also, you should have already introduced the numbers that you're going to be working with. So if you're working with the numbers 1 through 10, you have already introduced, probably in sandpaper numeral, sandpaper numeral versions of these, if you have them. And if not, it's totally fine to do the 3-period lesson with just regular cards like this. But you would have given them a 3-period lesson, and they would know their numerals before you give them. So they already know that this is 3. They already know that this is the numeral 3, and then you're ready for this lesson. Right. But if you do the lesson before, then your child isn't going to be able to do it as smoothly. They're going to be more interested in just trying to associate the quantity with the numeral rather than being interested in the sequencing part. So here we're taking the concept of, we know our quantities, we know our numerals. Same with the teens. Before you do this activity, your child needs to know their teens if they're going to do the teen part. And then the point of interest in this is understanding the sequence, these two have in the qualities. And these two have partners. We call that even. This one does not have a partner. And then this number must be odd.
So, and this is kind of, I think, such a pure example of what makes Montessori powerful. It kind of boiled down into this one lesson, which is that you really are trying to isolate down to specific concepts and build those specific concepts in a certain sequence. So you wouldn't jump in and say, here's a bunch of counters and here's a bunch of cards and we're going to put them together. You would want to introduce the earlier concepts and make sure that, so you might play the game like, go get me 3.
Quantity comes first,
3
then
feet.
comes the numeral identification.
Right.
Yeah. So first we name quantity. Once your kids are really good with that, then you teach them the numerals. And you can kind of be still playing those games simultaneously. Obviously there's going to be environmental exposure. If your child watches any common modern TV show, they're going to come across numbers numbers are everywhere. So they may know some of them already, but you're going to want to review the numbers 1 through 10 and make sure that they can name them before you do this work, and have really played around with quantity 1 to 10.
Okay. So they've got those concepts. Now you've got your set. I think it's time to give the lesson, right? Yeah. So how do you do that? How would you give this even odd and even lesson?
Okay. So first, we're going to get out our numeral cards.
Okay.
And they're going to be out of order. So
you're going to want to mix them up. Do you make a
number
pile?
One is... No. You're actually going to put them on the rug, and you're just going to, you kind of shuffle them, and then you're just going to place them on the rug. Maybe the 2 is over here, the 4 is here. You don't want them in order. You want them out of sequence. And you're going to leave an area at the top of your rug that doesn't have any numbers on it. You want that space blank, because that's your sequencing area.
Yeah.
And so you're the one who's putting these numbers down. And as you pick up a number, you're probably going, oh, what do you see? Oh, yes, it says 2, right? And you put it down on the rug. Oh, what is this? 1. And then you put the 1. I'm going to put the 1 over here. Oh, what is this? 4. I want to put the 4, I think, up here. So you're going to just randomly scatter them around, talk about the numbers as you do it. And then you're going to look at all these scattered numbers on the rug, and you're going to put them in order. Can you guess? You already know, right? Where do you put the number 1? It's a very specific place.
I think it goes at the front.
On your rug.
Oh, yes, it goes on your rug, at the front of your rug. No, I think it goes on the top.
The top
left.
The top left corner.
Yeah.
That's where just about everything in Montessori that is the beginning of any sequence.
And that's because we're in, at least in English and other similar languages, we read left to right. And so the ordering of the cards, as I understand it, is to help train that. So we want to order them left to right.
When you think about numbers, we usually order them left to
right. From 0 down, and then
0 up,
unless it's a negative. Right?
And then I guess we could go backwards later, but later,
right.
Right. So you're going to take that 1, put it up, top, left, And then you're going to find the 2, hunt for the 2. Can you find it? Oh, there it is. I'm going to put it right next to it. I don't know. We're going like this. I don't know what if they are seeing the mirror.
It's going to go left to right
not,
from 1
left
to
to
whatever.
right across the top of your rug. All right.
1 to 10.
1 to 10. And then now you've got all your numbers all laid out. They've all been sequenced and you get to put your counters with them. And so with the first one, you're going to go right back to that number 1.
So here it is. It's at the top
and you're
left of the rug.
You're not going to talk a lot during this part.
Oh, that's going to be hard for me.
you're gonna point to the numeral, and you'll say 1. And then you'll come back into your little bowl and you'll get 1 counter and you're going to put it right here on this. Well, gosh, I can't tell. And if it's not in reverse, it's on the left side.
Also the top left.
Top left. I know. And then that's it, so it is all alone. That's all you're doing. You're just associating the quantity with the numeral. And then for the 2, you're going to point, you're going to say 2. 1, 2, and then there they will be. You know that they're partners, and you can talk about it at this stage if you want, but you don't really have to for the very first lesson for cards and counters. You're just putting the quantity underneath the numbers, right? But then when you are ready to talk about odd and even, and this could be after you've done the whole lesson all the way to 1 to 10, you could repeat it another day and decide, okay, the purpose of this time, we're going to do odd and even and focus on that. You're going to do the same thing, associate all the quantities with all of the numerals. But then when you get to 3, all right, you're going to be going 3, 1, 2, and then you're going to put this one down here, and it's going to be obviously all alone. Now, some Montessorians put it in the middle, and that's perfectly fine. It really does draw the attention that it is all alone. And some, you can just keep it in line, and it's up to you what you choose. We decided to keep ours in line. Here's an example of what that would look like if you were doing it with your quantity. But it's also okay if you were to want to move this one into the middle. Okay. So that is the next step. And while you're doing that, you're counting 1, 2, 3, odd, no partner. And then you're counting the 4 and you're going 1, 2, 3, 4. Partners, even. So you're just teaching the concepts of odd and even as you go.
Now, are you sorting at this point, or you're just?
No, we're not using the labels at this point.
We're just laying it out, and we're just
laying it out. We're just making it a part of conversation. We're talking about it. We're giggling about it, and we're talking about, well, do you think that person is lonely, or do you think they're enjoying working all by themselves? And 9 times out of 10, I don't know. Children like to pretend both.
Yeah.
But we talk a lot about independent work in Montessori, so they may be like, they're doing it by themselves. They're happy. I don't know. So you're having those conversations. And then there are other extensions that you can do with them. So after you've explored it that way, just orally, maybe you decide to play, I don't know, maybe you're going to play a little game. Maybe you take your numerals, keep doing it, and maybe you put them face down, have your child pick a card, go ahead and pick a card, turn it over. 1.
Yeah.
Is that odd or even?
I think it is odd.
Let's see. I'm going to put our counter underneath. Is it all alone?
It is all alone.
It is odd. And then you can take this numeral, and on your rug, you can sort it under the label. So maybe you have your labels on your rug, and you've got the number 1 on odd, and then in even, eventually you get, the numbers 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, right?
Yeah.
So that can be another fun extension that you can do that really starts to have them. It's kind of almost like a memory game where they're like starting to use their memory, like, is it? let's count and find out, and see. And before long, your children are just going to get it. It is a pattern. We're basically counting by twos and it's even.
But those predecessor skills are so essential.
They are.
Yeah.
And then we've got our little people. And so I'll show you with the 15 or the 16.
The 16.
Yeah. So you can do the same thing. Is it odd or is it even? 16. Well, let's see, and then you count them with some objects, or maybe you just play the game of just associating, counting these and associating it with a numeral to play it like that.
Yep.
And then maybe you take this and maybe you put that under the category that says
even though it isn't a numeral, it's still even.
Or maybe you lay all of these out on a rug, like all of them, just all, I don't know. You could even do the ones from 1 to 10 if you want to make it a really big work. You could lay out the ones that are just the simple and mix them up with the teens if your children are there yet.
Yep.
And then you're going to order these by the 2 categories of odd and even. Imagine what a big work that would be if you decided to put either backwards. If you decided to put all of the numbers from 1 to 20 under either even or odd, that would be a really big work and it would be fun.
Yep.
You could even have a whole rug just for odd numbers and a whole rug for even numbers. And then you could even take it further if your child wants to get out the 100 board.
There's no limit.
Have a 100 board, maybe you do all the way to 100 category. I mean, you just keep on going and going and going.
And you play until your child is
done,
wanting to play anymore, right?
Until they're done.
And they might get hooked on it and want to play it for over and over and over again for who knows how many times.
This is one of the activities that I think is way underestimated in terms of its potential for continued fun. This is an activity that I think you could have it on the math shelf for a long, long time.
Yeah, like we said, it is actually, we would say it's in the primary, but we actually also see it in the lower elementary curriculum. So especially for, like I said earlier, when we say level 1, 2, 3, it doesn't mean grade 1, 2, 3 or pre-K versus toddler or something like that. It just means where are they starting in their knowledge? And where are they going from there? What is it?
Well, I just got an idea, but go ahead, keep going.
No, please.
I don't want to interrupt you.
This is your chance to interrupt me. Do it. Revenge.
Well, I was thinking, what if you took these labels into daily life, and then you went over to like your bookcase and you counted all the books to see if you had an odd or an even number of books on your bookcase? Or what if you got out a mandarin orange and you peeled it and you got out all those little segments, and then you were going to determine, is it an odd number of little segments inside our snack today, or is it even? We could do it with goldfish.
Totally.
Or, I mean, you could just, like, if this is just out on your shelf, you could just have so much fun. You bring them outside.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally. Because I mean, in a way, also you're getting to teaching patterns.
Yes.
And that leads a bit into geometry, which is a separate subject for us. We count geometry separately from mathematics because they're related, but they're not identical. But the idea of like seeing patterns and the way sequences work, it's very powerful. Okay, so
fun.
So obviously this is a math lesson. We have in our curriculum, we say there are 4 core areas of mathematics: operations, number sense, memorization. And what was the last one? Let's see here. I can't remember. Fractions and decimals. Fractions and decimals you'll do later. I don't think we might introduce fractions and decimals at the primary years.
Not the decimals, but the fractions. You do.
That's right. Okay. So so number sense, operations. So that's like adding and subtracting, or 4 operations. The fractions and decimals, and memorization. And so you could see that with this lesson, it's clearly number sense, which is kind of the sequencing and the names, but there's also memorization in there. And you're also starting to think through the patterns that you would see with the odds and the evens, especially as you're going out into the world. I think that would be really interesting.
Yes.
So it's a lot of fun. What age? You said it really depends on the child's readiness, of course, but in general, you see a readiness at around age 4.5.
You see a readiness to really delve into numbers around age 4.
So if you have a 2.5-year-old and they're not loving
But
it,
that's not to
then
say that children aren't ready at different ages.
Of
So, I
course, of
mean, that's
course.
just the average age that children seem to have a spark of real interest in math and want to go deeper.
That's right. And that's
so-
why it counts over into the
Yeah,
lower
but when I
elementary as
taught
well.
kindergarten, I had this in my classroom, and children really, really enjoyed it.
That's right.
And that was ages 5 and 6.
Mhm.
But if your child is younger and they are ready for it, you know your child best. So you should give it to them whenever they know their numerals
Mhm.
and they have a good understanding of quantity from 1 to 10.
Excellent.
Good.
All right. Well, I think that's going to end it for the day. It has been a pleasure, as always. If you're interested in learning more about our work, or if you want to learn more about the 4 domains within mathematics and what all those mean, head over to our website, childoftheredwoods.com. We have some free information. We will make this set available pretty soon as well if you're interested in that, or you can DIY one. You've seen us lay it out.
Mhm.
And let's see, we'll be back next week. Now, next week we have one of my favorite. I think it's the first one we're doing that's a lower elementary.
Oh, no, we did geometry sticks.
Oh, that's right. Well, this is we're doing one of my very favorite lower elementary lessons, though.
Which is
The second grade lesson.
the timeline of life.
Timeline of life.
Oh, that's going to be fun.
That's going to be fun. So we will see you hopefully next week for the timeline of life.
Sounds good.